Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Krueger and I'm an accounting major here at Vanguard University, and I am also a junior. And today I will be sharing with you my story, how God has worked in my life, and I'm happy and honored to be sharing it with you all, whoever may be watching. And just to get to know a little bit more about who I am, a little bit about my personality, I guess. A big part of who I am is I love to laugh. I love to laugh a lot. I guarantee you that if you don't think you're funny, you could probably make me laugh. I doubt that you couldn't. My big part of my character is joy. I love being happy. I think my usual state is joy. But that ties into my story, and that's why I'm starting off with that. But to get a little bit more of a foundational knowledge about my story, I was born in a Christian family, and so I went to a private Christian elementary school and then public high school, which was interesting. And then here I am now at Vanguard University, and very happy to be here. And so today I'll be starting off with my experience from elementary and progressing through high school. A major struggle that I had in those years was feeling valued. I felt that from my family, but in terms of valuing myself and seeing that value is something that I struggled with a lot. My sister was somebody who always did well in school, was always a 4.0 student, and that didn't always come so naturally to me. So it was a lot to live up to, even to the point where in high school, my teachers would look at the roster and then they'd look at my face and then they'd say, "You have big shoes to fill." And obviously on the first day of school, that's not something you really want to hear. But yeah, so that was my experience going through school. And because of that, I felt that in order for myself to find value in myself, I needed to be accomplished. I needed to accomplish things. I needed to go and do things that others hadn't or didn't expect of me. And so that's where I was seeking value at the time. And I have a lot of examples to show how God progressed through my life in showing me my value, but I have some other things I would also like to cover in my story as well. So I'll just be using one example. And one thing I struggled the most in at school was math. And I know some of you are going, okay, yeah, I know another person that struggled with math as well. Because I know that there's a lot of people that struggle in math, especially initially in elementary school and so on. But that was a great weakness for me. And for some of you who may know me now, doing well in school is something very important to me. But not doing well in math was a big struggle because I was failing every math assignment. That was the point that I was in at the start. And so that was very difficult. That was very difficult for me to go through. And it hit a point where I really needed help, and I really needed to search help. And this is actually the same year that I got baptized, where these things sort of started to change around. And I had been praying for years, and I remember saying the exact same prayer of just asking God to help me to do something that would make me different from everyone else. And when I did, 2 years or a year and a half later from the point of getting F's on all my assignments, there was an organized competition, I think the state of California. It was a math competition. And I believe there were 22 schools that were involved in it. And I remember my teacher coming up to me and saying, "I want you to participate in it." And for someone that was getting F's on all their assignments a year and a half prior, that's a pretty big request. But I ended up actually getting first place in the competition. And that's not for me to brag at all, because for me to go from one point to another wasn't something that I could have done on my own. And it took a point of perseverance with prayer, and just constantly working hard at it. And of course, I'm tying this into my story, so it'll help you to get a better understanding. And so what I would have considered at the time my greatest weakness ended up becoming my greatest strength in school. And so I let that define who I was. I let that define my success, and my worth was based on how well I did. And so when, I guess, fast forward into the chapter of high school, I'll consider chapter 1 being the story of my weakness being turned into a great strength, which I give glory to God for, and it took a long time, but I did get there. But in chapter 2, fast forward to high school, what I would consider my greatest strength in who I am ended up becoming weak. And as I mentioned before, part of that I would consider myself to be in my personality is someone who's joyful, optimistic, someone that loves to laugh and smile, and that's just who I am. But when I loved encouraging people as well. And life hits pretty hard for those people because sometimes it's hard to find the light in every scenario. And so people actually weren't too receptive of that. I know a lot of people that rebuked that in me because they didn't appreciate any point of joy or positivity. And that adding on to the personal struggles of some family health issues, some relationship issues, and academic stress as well, because I went to a very, very intense high school. It brought me to a point where I experienced anxiety and depression. And it got to the point where the people that knew me the best, would look at me and they wouldn't recognize me by anything other than my face. They would look at me and they'd look at how I acted and how I behaved, and they saw that I was almost an entirely different person. And that was hard. Because what I mentioned before is I let math define who I was, my accomplishments in that. And I lost track of my joy, which was, in a way, a very important part to my identity. And through that struggle, and as I mentioned before, I've been a Christian ever since I was little. I did the 5-year-old Lord come into my heart prayer. And I haven't necessarily strayed from that, but it is these struggles that kind of were always bringing me to a point of prayer. And the season that I went through, where I had that struggle with the anxiety and the season of depression, my experience with prayer is it took about 2 years. I experienced this for about 2 years during my high school years. And that was tough, because 2 years is a lot when you're going day by day, prayer by prayer. And just taking one day at a time is the most important thing, and learning to have that attitude of taking one day at a time, not knowing when things might get to a point where you're happy again, but you're no longer living in either fear, stress, or emotions that just weigh you down, and that burden of it. And through that season, I remember someone told me, and I don't know why they came up with this, but it works. They told me to go in my closet and pray, and it's something I already done before. But what they told me to do is they told me to write down what weighed me down and what I was, in a way, reaching for, but couldn't quite get there. And I know in life we have a lot of those times where we're just trying to reach for something, but it feels as if we just can't. And they encouraged me to write it down, and they encouraged me to imagine that I had a heavy chain just weighing down on my shoulders. And they said, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to take this chain and lift it off your head in a time of prayer and worship with God. And I want you to imagine that you're laying it down in front of Jesus on the cross. And I remember doing that because I was willing to try anything at that point, because I had been going through it for 2 years. And sometimes for a lot of people at that time, you're losing hope too, that you're never going to get back to that point of joy. But in that time of prayer and worship, the moment that my hands passed my head, I felt physically lighter and emotionally lighter as well. People saw the difference in who I was. People recognized the difference. Literally, my posture was physically better. I spent most of my days coming home with a smile on my face, which is where I started, but that went away for a while. And that's a huge part of who I am. So to find that again was huge. But the important thing was, and what God showed me through all of this and through this journey, is that when I lost my joy, it was because I had placed my value in who I was on my accomplishments. I had placed my joy. There's nothing wrong with being optimistic, but I'd placed my joy on my ability to find the light in every scenario, which sometimes isn't always possible, or at least it's just very difficult at times. And so my joy relied on all of this, and it was unstable because of that. And so what I was shown through all of that is that it needed to be placed in a part. My joy needed to be placed in an area where it wasn't going to be shaken. And throughout that whole season, next season, I learned how to live out, in quotes, the joy of the Lord is my strength. Because I found my joy in my accomplishments. I found my joy in my worth. Because sometimes if you don't find worth in yourself, it's hard to keep moving. It is. But God showed me that where I could find my joy truly, and that I could find it in Him. And that the reason why I lost it, and that doesn't mean life's going to be, a field of daisies if you place your joy in the Lord. But what I am saying is that when you place your joy in the Lord, life's still a roller coaster, and you may be shaken, but that grip is a whole lot stronger on who you are, and your relationship with God is a whole lot stronger when you find your joy in Him, because God is always good. And I encourage you all to take time to recognize that, because when you do recognize that, you can trust in Him, and that joy becomes your strength. And one of the verses that helped me out a lot through this time was Psalms 29:11, which says, "The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace." And I think that's a very relevant verse for today. I'm sure a lot of you are struggling with a lot of things, and usually where you struggle, you're not always finding peace. And sometimes you need strength, because I know we can't do everything on our own. And I know that from my story in a lot of ways, more than what I've shared so far. And so in that, God showed me where my joy could be placed. And he didn't force me. Like I said, he helped me to find, he helped me to experience what I initially wanted. But he showed me what was worth valuing in me and in him and in my life in general. I love the verse in Psalms where it mentions, take delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And one of the great parts that I love about that verse is, in my life, God transformed what my desires were. And then he blessed me with what I truly desired. Because sometimes we want things, but we don't truly know what it is. And I personally believe that we all desire God, whether we believe in him or not. We desire good, we desire peace, we desire strength, we desire joy, we desire forgiveness, we desire to be whole rather than broken. And the only way we can receive that is through Christ. And through that, we truly desire him. And sometimes he has to allow us to see that desire first, so that he can then give us that desire, that true desire of our heart. And so in my story, when I experienced the struggle to see that value of myself, he showed me where to see that value. He showed me where to find my joy when I had lost it. And both of those things, he just showed me who he was. And now in a way you might think, well, that just sounds narcissistic. But by knowing who God is, it transforms how we view ourselves. And depending on how we view ourselves, it transforms how we see God. Because Christ died for us. And so if you think of God as someone far greater than yourself, which he is, he died for you, that changes your value. But if you look at yourself and you say, and you recognize who you are, that changes your value of God. You think, wow, he died for me. He's the one that brings me value. And so that was that just completely transformed my heart, who I am, and he brought me back to a place where I'd realize my worth in him rather than the worth in my circumstance or my accomplishments. And I think especially for this time that I know that we're all going through, a lot of us are looking for, in a way, the light at the end of the tunnel. But if you're living your life looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, you might be waiting. And remember, I told you I love being optimistic. But what I am saying is that you don't want to place your joy in your life based on the ups and downs of your life. Because if your joy is going to be up whenever your life's going good, well, that's going to be a bumpy ride for you, emotionally and spiritually. And like I said, the only thing really constant is God. And when you place your joy and your value in him, you can trust that that's not going to be shaken like you would be otherwise. And so when we're looking for light at the end of the tunnel, we need to take time to recognize that the true light that even shines brighter is within us. And that makes it a whole lot easier. That makes life a whole lot easier. Knowing that whatever you're going through, you just hold the hand of God like a kid holding his dad's finger at Disneyland. And just knowing that even though you're in a dark tunnel, you still got that light with you. And that is enough to carry you as far as God's going to take you. And but I'd love to share some more examples about my story and how God has really revealed himself by showing me who I am and therefore showing who he is. But I think it's also important that we all individually, as you watching this video, take time to recognize who you are and therefore who God is. Now, if you can't start with who you are because you don't value yourself, then I encourage you to start with God and then learn who you are. And that ties into my last point, was that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for prayer, if it wasn't for seeing how God would take care of me, not by making my circumstances better, but by giving me strength to get through my circumstances of that anxiety and depression and of so many other things. And I always think of prayer like a letter. You have the address of who it's from, and you have the address of who it's going to. Now, of course, it's a little more intimate. Our prayer time with God is a little more intimate than a letter. But you have to understand who it's coming from and who it's going to. And that makes it allows prayer to have more purpose. And so, in a way, you can go through your life looking at God and just glorifying him. But if you don't understand who you are, well, then in a way you can't fully understand who he is because you don't understand his sacrifice. So I know a lot of this has been me sort of giving a message rather than just my story, but I hope you can see the connection between my story and what I've been having to share with you today. But I thank you all for listening, and I thank you for tuning in to hear my story. And I encourage you all to pray about this afterwards, or just to learn about who you are and who God is, and to place your joy and your strength and your identity in him, not your circumstances. Because in these circumstances and what we're living in, this crazy time of 2020, it's a roller coaster. But if you got that light with you, you're not going to be waiting for the end of the tunnel because you've already got it. And there's no point of counting the seconds until it's over. It becomes a time where sometimes you experience God even more than other times. It's that still soft voice, that whisper that sometimes we find in moments like these. So again, thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thank you.